And well, we are live, it
There we
seems.
go.
Hello, Dylan.
Hi. Everything coming through now that you're live? Good.
Yeah, it looks like it. Checking YouTube to see if it started properly.
All right. Wonderful.
Yep, YouTube is going well. Well, Dylan, welcome to my stream. I'm Moff, Memories of the Future. It's my sort of nickname, tag name. And today I asked you here, and you're kind enough to come to have a conversation about worker co-ops. Why they are a thing in 2021, why they should be a thing in 2021, and let's see what conclusions can we draw. Okay, do you want to begin with a statement or something?
Yeah, sure. I'll give an opening statement that I gave in my previous debate. That's kind of the basis of this conversation. And I just want to talk about like what I'm representing to here, right? Like, because what I'm going to come off and represent here is mostly just an advocacy for worker cooperatives here. So I'd just like to say I'm Dylan. I'll be representing, like a socialist worker cooperative type of system. I'd like to, define it before I start. Scientific socialism is a best way to describe a practical system in which the workers own the means of production and have a democratic workforce structure. This system would both positively impact the workers and make them owners in the process. This would be really pressing coming in the future with the advent of things like automation and the way of, like work being lost. And this would help people turn them into owners. In regions that systems like these have been implemented, it has been both proven sustainable and it's overall increased the productivity of the workers and the workplace happiness. So that's basically what I advocate for, and that's what I'll be talking about here today.
Okay, I see that you skipped the Trotsky part, inspired part, and it was in
I,
the
I mean, I,
title.
I I can talk on that a little bit if you want me to. I'd just like to say
Sure.
that
Well, it's in
I'm
the
an
title,
unorthodox.
so
Yeah, I'm an unorthodox Trotskyist. So what I do is I look at things with more of a Trotsky influenced lens of analysis. But there's lots of points that Leon Trotsky and I disagree on. Like he's more revolutionary than I am, and I'm not so much like that. I prefer working in the framework of a liberal democracy. There's just a lot of stuff though that I like to do with this sort of like unified global concept. It's very unpragmatic, but it's an idea worth striving for to create sort of like a unity, some kind of global unity. Because like the point of socialism is to try and take away unjust hierarchies, right? So what we're trying to
at
do is,
least uh, at least
in
one aspect.
theory, that's one of the main goals, right? So theoretically, when I'm trying to take away this unjust hierarchy, I look at it through sort of a Trotskyist lens, and I enjoy some of like the old, the classics from like the classic Marxist literature, right? But I don't take all of it at face value. So that's why I would consider myself like unorthodox, but looking at things through a Trotskyist lens of analysis.
Okay, can you give like quickly an example of what do you like from what inspires you from Trotsky and what is something that you don't like and you would definitely stay away because he kind of did things on a large uh, on a large
Yeah. Sure, I can.
spectrum, and different people can have different opinions, different angles, and so on. So why do you pick these things, and why you shouldn't? Your
Yeah,
personal.
sure. So there's a little bit of things. There's quite a few things that I like about Trotsky, quite a few things I dislike. But one things I like is the incorporation of like the concept of anarchism into the like lens of looking at things. So what I would like to do is I'd like to basically set out to create sort of like the goal is to reach a point where the state can eventually wither away and become unnecessary. That seems like really, really like highly improbable as of the way things are going right now. But that's because of certain power structures. But in like using a Trotskyist lens of looking at things, you sort of dismantle like the state after it withers away after a while, right? One thing that I don't like that Trotsky advocates for is revolutions. I really don't like revolutions because I think these things, like when you kind of quickly seize the means of production, it really leads to a lot of civil unrest and a lot of like, you know, a hard time. There's not really a lot of infrastructure put in place to make sure that the state can sustain itself. And it becomes really prone to like, you know, quick takeovers from people like Stalin, for example.
Well, for or people like any other good opportunist, good the right person at the right place and the right time, correct?
I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's all about like, I mean, like you could say that, but like, I don't like to leave things up to faith and chance as much as I like to give the power, like try to get power in the hands of everyone, because this will lead to more of an outcome that's, like, well, I should probably do what's best for everyone, because in this case, it'll be best for me, right?
Yes, yes.
That's sort
The
of
You open the door for a whole range of justifications based on arbitrary reasons instead of more principled way of working and making decisions. Okay, I see that. So you are saying that in 2020 we need worker co-ops, okay?
Yeah, I think that's the direction we should start moving in. I wouldn't say, like an immediate seizure of the means of production. Like I just said, revolutions are pretty unstable. But with the advent of people like Bernie Sanders, for example, becoming popular, and generally there being more and more economic like inequality in between people, I think it's probably a good idea to move in that direction.
Okay, let me throw a wrench in the proverbial bike wheel. Wasn't Bernie the dude who kind of was both selling out and was subminated by his own party? Like, I know the ideas of Bernie or something, but ultimately in practice, I wouldn't put my money on a Bernie type of structure of a leader of a persona and stuff.
The thing for Bernie Sanders is like I agree with a lot of his policy decisions because he applies like a democratic socialist label to himself, which is similar to something I'd apply to myself, right? Because like one of the goals is democracy. Like that's part of like getting power into the most hands of the most people. And he generally just likes to move in that direction. He seemed to have been one of the more popular center left, like left leaning people in terms of the American like Overton window politics, and that's another thing I liked about him. He has taken really principled stances on things, and the only issue I had was that the party threw him under the bus. So like they kind of need to take a stand against the party as opposed to like the two party system, as opposed to like a stand against Bernie Sanders as an individual. He did really well in
Yeah.
the primaries too. Like millions of people voted for him. He had some of the highest turnouts in terms of like support at those rallies. But the party
Mhm.
decided that Joe Biden was a more electable candidate, so that's why they ran with him. Which maybe.
Yeah, so what I was trying to get from you is the fact that, yeah, Bernie Sanders did speak about lots of interesting stuff, lots of good principles, but ultimately he kind of failed when it was about, party work, party collaboration, in party politics and stuff like that. And I I wouldn't go as far as to say one definitely undermines the other, but he kind of points out that maybe Bernie was a bit too much of an idealist and was a bit too much disconnected from the people that really from the party and from having real power inside the party. And if we look in some more turbulent times in other countries in last century, well, things could have ended and definitely ended badly for other people who weren't very well connected with the power structures of a party. Okay, so that would be my
Yeah,
issue.
if there's one thing I can say on that, just to touch on that really quickly, the thing that I was noticing more so with Bernie Sanders and sort of his type of, how should we put it, like progressive Democrat slash social democrat leaning movement, more of these candidates have been getting more and more popular, and a lot of these people are making their way into Congress. Like you look at someone like Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, or Ilhan Omar, Nina Turner. She's making a campaign for Congress right now, Ohio. Like, this is sort of the things that like spark these movements, right? They popularize it. And that's generally like why I like the direction Bernie Sanders was moving in. So like maybe I don't see someone like Bernie Sanders getting much done in terms of the party, but you see the party moving, trending in the direction of a Bernie Sanders type, right? Maybe it's slowly, maybe it takes a long time, but we're still getting there and we're still progressing, right?
Well, let's say I beg to differ. I wouldn't. My personal perspective is that AOC and Ilhan Omar or other popular people, what was them called, the gang or something like that. I wouldn't put them nowhere near the caliber of Bernie Sanders. Not Bernie Sanders old, not Bernie Sanders when he was young, nowhere near. It's like a heaven and earth difference between AOC and what Bernie could deliver. And I mostly don't agree with Bernie's position or stuff like that, but I still can say that whatever Bernie was talking about had much more wisdom and depth and ideological consistency in certain periods than whatever AOC or other like her can master. So I don't know. Here, for example, I would say that the movement might, after Bernie Sanders in this period, because Bernie is old and will retire in the next years or something, will have to suffer with people like AOC trying to pick up the mantle or position in the same shoes. That's a big role, and to fit big steps, big shoes to fit. And I don't think AOC is the caliber can do it.
You know, I would agree with you on that. The thing is, like, I'm not just saying, like, the thing is there's more and more people like that getting into office. So maybe not so much Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but someone like that, or maybe even her as she gets more experience in office, as she does more terms, she feels, like she gets used to the life of being in government for a longer time. Like, someone will eventually have to pick up the mantle of a Bernie Sanders, right? After he, retires or kicks the bucket or whatever, right? Like, I look at Bernie Sanders as someone who picked up more of the mantle on, say, like Mike Gravel, right? Mike Gravel, I don't know if you heard, he just recently passed away. Like 2 days ago, I think, or yesterday.
I'm not in depth. I have the general idea, but
yeah, no, he was a Democratic Socialist leaning politician too. He ran in the 2008 election against Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, all of these people, right? Like in the primaries. And his goal wasn't so much to kind of win as it was to popularize his ideas. So like that's like where people like Bernie Sanders kind of, they go, well, if this guy can do it, I can get on that stage. I can talk about these ideas. I can, spread awareness of what I'm trying to say, what I'm advocating for. And while it may not seem like it's doing much, it seems like it's doing something because more people are trending in that direction. The Overton window of American politics is slowly but surely moving to the left. In terms of like economics, anyways, like it's not super left leaning. I would never like even dream of that, but like higher minimum wage, things like this, these policies, the stimulus checks, these are becoming more popular, right? And these are social leaning policies.
Sure, but again, I will state one thing and we'll move to the next point. The caliber and the way Bernie acted and how much was popular and how well he spread certain ideas among certain demographics was awesome. Right now, what I see AOC doing as a person who is not from the States, but I still keep in touch with American politics, it's too much grifting and very little coherent discourse. Okay, too much posturing, grifting. Like, come on, you can do better than.
I don't like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's not really like one of my favorite politicians. I have a lot of issues with the way that she conducts herself in terms of like grifting like that, But I'm not saying that she necessarily has to be the one to pick up the mantle. Just, I think personally it's going to be Nina Turner. I think she's going to do some time in Congress. And I think that's really going to like boost her popularity because she's a huge Sanders ally. really well spoken, smart woman, but yet religious too. Like, you know, that's something Americans still look for in a politician, right? Like, I think she's got
Yeah.
all of the potential makings of someone to, like, you know, be a leader in the movement.
Hmm.
So,
For
like,
example,
that's important, right?
oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just saying that's a very important thing, right? Like, I'm not saying that the leader necessarily has to be AOC. It just has to be someone who, you know, someone will rise up. Like, and after Mike Gravel retired, it was Bernie Sanders, and after Bernie Sanders is going to retire, it might be it might be Elizabeth Warren, and I really don't like Elizabeth Warren. But if she were to like advocate for policies that I agree with, even though I really dislike her, I guess
Yeah,
that
like,
wouldn't be the worst thing, right? Like, you know, but you
come
get the
on.
like the gist of what I'm saying, right?
Yeah. But come on, America, you definitely can do better and should do better than
Then
AOC
Warren, oh yeah.
and yeah, exactly. For example, it was the thing in the what was that winter, early January, with Jimmy Dore pressing the topic of health Medicare for all or something like that,
Yeah,
and
no,
she
AOC
was
didn't even show up on the show, did she?
yeah, and all the things associated with everybody lying, denying, hiding, and I'm not a fan of Jimmy Dore. Like for a pretty good period of time, I said like, yeah, okay, he's doing his stuff on the left, like whatever. But then on that topic, I said, hey, look, that's a person who speaks coherently about some principles, and the other people who are supposed to be there, the leading folks of the young folks, the old folks are all hiding. Okay, and that was very
Yeah, no, I don't like Jimmy Dore either.
disappointing.
But like, I was really kind of disappointed by that. There's a lot of these, like, there's a lot of people I think on the left, like Brianna Joy Gray, like that are just kind of griftery and bad faith. You know, that I don't really want representing like the movement that I sort of, you know, take part in. So like personally, I would maybe even like throw my hat in for office myself. Now, I'm not from America, but American politics have a big effect on me as far as where I live, so it's important to keep up with them.
Please tell me a country where American politics doesn't trickle in
True.
stuff like.
Yeah. But like I just meant extremely because I'm like directly north of the Detroit border in
Oh, I
Canada,
see.
right? So it's like extremely pertinent to us, right? Like so the
Okay,
thing
so
is yeah, I gotta keep a real close eye on that.
mhm. Let's get back on the topic of worker co-ops. Okay, so politicians will do their stuff. Why should we care in 2021 about worker co-ops?
Yeah, this is something I talked about in my opening statement. We can all acknowledge that, you know, with the way that like our technological revolution is progressing, things like people losing work in this current capitalist model, that's just inevitable, right? Like
Okay.
robots are going to take over eventually, doing a lot of the work that we do. Like, you know, because a lot
Hmm.
of like jobs done by individuals can be replaced like by machines. Like you see jobs at McDonald's going to those, you know, touch screen machines where people can place their orders in and things like that, right? There will be self-driving cars to replace truckers.
Absolutely. Now we have like two aspects we need to touch upon. And one is the aspect of if we need worker co-ops which are good, that must mean that we kind of presume we have the presumption already, or maybe even the conclusion that the existing corporations are bad, correct?
Worker co-ops. The thing is they need to be like more widespread, right? Like that's kind of what I'm seeking to do here. There's a lot of
Okay, so
reasons like we can go into why there's not nearly
mhm.
enough of them right now too. Like that's another thing.
But are they in a direct sort of answer and in opposition, something like worker co-ops good, corporations bad?
Worker co-ops, they basically like they take that risk factor out of there being like good benevolent corporations versus bad, you know, like inhumane corporations. They sort of remove some of like the dice roll factor of that. It's personally what I
Okay.
like about them, right?
So we are not starting from a position that if corporation exists and they are capitalist, they are inherently bad and they should be replaced.
I wouldn't say inherently bad, but inherently exploitative of like the average person because that's just the nature of working and not getting the profits from it. You might be getting your paycheck, but you're only living, like a lot of the time, people only live paycheck to paycheck, right? They're not really reaping any of the actual like profits from their labor, you know, because they don't have a say in how the workforce is structured and things like that. I think it's better for the average worker if they get that kind of, you know, interest represented.
Okay, so one thing would be that if we implement this version of worker co-ops, then they would be paid more, or what would be the direct example,
So
direct improvement?
there's quite a few direct improvements you'd see. There's like sources and studies that show workers, which by the way, 10% of the current workforce, like workplace structure is worker cooperatives. Like there's papers that have, you know, like backed this up. And what they show is that they directly lead to very marginally, but still somewhat higher worker productivity. But they lead to an overall like quality of happiness in the workplace because the workers, you know, generally get things that are more in their best interest. And this might include pay raises. This might include benefits, time off, you know, whatever, right? Like thanks to things like labor unions, that's how we got the weekend at the turn of the century, right? You know, how people weren't working 7 days a week. They only were working 5 days a week.
Okay, but let's say we have the classic example with Amazon, huge company, evil Jeff Bezos at its top, people peeing in bottles and not seeing the sun because they work in these warehouses. Okay, so if Amazon would give people extra 30 minutes of break time and thus wouldn't force them to pee in bottles, and they would have normal breaks for like normal human beings, and they would give them throw in couple of more bucks on the hour as extra payment, and of course corporations like right now have already have implemented internal procedures to gather feedback from their employees. Okay, and of course everybody who works and collaborates with said warehouse in the case of Amazon. Okay, could that be a thing that Amazon no longer is a bad corporation and it's a good something and it doesn't need to be replaced?
See, the thing with that is that's like generally trending in the direction of what I'm talking about, right? Like, see, what I'm advocating for is a complete democratic structure, but this is like the direction people would move. So a logical next step from where you are would probably be to come where I am, right? That's not a bad thing. Like that's probably a great thing for the workers. You know, they get paid more on top of this, and that's kind of what unions do, right? Like that's what they advocate for, and that's what they get the worker. You know, things like that. They're very big unifying like groups that, you know, get policies and pushed in and minimum wages raised, things like that, right? So Amazon might look like a good employer past a certain point. But generally, if things just keep trending in that like positive social direction, they'll eventually come to where I am, where the workers will, you know, own probably some of the country, or company, not
Wait,
country, sorry, company.
wait. Why would Jeff Bezos? Okay, he will throw the workers a couple of dollars more per hour and maybe 30 minutes more of break because he maybe added some robots or something like that. But why would Jeff Bezos suddenly give you, besides having your feedback and you know your opinions and feelings taken under consideration, what would he suddenly give you decision power?
Well, the thing is I'm looking at this as the perspective of like a longer process, right? So I think Jeff Bezos will probably die before that ever happens, you know? Right? So what I'm saying here is, you know, maybe after Jeff Bezos dies, the executives of the company, you know, they don't really choose who takes over. Rather, the employees, there would be some sort of like government policies put in that are like, well, you know what, it's time to let the workers, you know, they get a workplace democracy, followed by them eventually owning it, right? So like the one guy at the top goes away, and then they kind of like reevaluate their workforce structure, you know?
Yeah, but I'm more than sure that we can easily find other psychopaths to replace Jeff Bezos. Okay.
Oh, I agree. I'm sure they're well capable of that. But the thing is,
yes. So
you're talking
what
about a
is
system. Wait, can I just say something really quick? You're
sure,
talking about a system where we, more positively, impact the worker, right? Like we're like, here's a couple extra dollars. Oh, you want extra time off, right? The thing is these workers are now going to become more okay with unionizing, and the worker probably gets more power, so they probably vote in a Bernie Sanders type who probably puts in some sort of protectionist policies, right? So the company doesn't really want to leave the country, and they kind of want to do business in a superpower country like America with, the highest GDP in the world, right? So they kind of have to bend their knee to what the workers want, right? Like that's the thing, is we're just trending in the direction of giving the workers what they want.
Well, I might agree that it looks like it. I still haven't heard a qualitative reasoning why they should give more power to the worker. And I don't know why you mentioned GDP, because ultimately GDP it measures kind of like how much money are in the economy. The fact that
no,
the economy,
that's what I'm saying, right? It's the economy. It's a big economy, but I'm saying
yes,
people in the economy, like if you're a business owner, you don't want to potentially lose on getting a piece of that, even if like the economic inequality is like huge, like 1% of people own like 90% of the wealth, but you don't want to lose out on the opportunity of having a piece of some of that, right? So you have to stay in the country because a lot of your profits get generated from the people in a country with 300 million people in it, right? So people have to work there because they've got to deliver your packages. They've got to box things up. Some of the production is done there. Some products are produced there, right? Like there's a lot.
Makes sense. I wanted to ask that because people usually go from GDP to directly saying or implying that the quality, if the GDP is high, something, the quality of life of average Joe is higher. Okay, so it was GDP mentioned. Well, better to ask and be sure than
true.
Okay, so it was definitely GDP in the context of corporation making money inside the economy, not necessarily directly.
Yeah, no. GDP doesn't necessarily mean the quality of life is higher, right? Because it's all about how the GDP is dispersed and how it's being used and how the money circulates around the economy. Yeah, that's the important part, right?
Yeah, and I think it's a good point to be made because again, people are throwing on plenty of sides of the spectrum. People are throwing, oh, look, the GDP of the country. Like, people, come on, that's not how GDP works. And for you and me, GDP is mostly meaningless unless we get to a certain level of capital or power, political power, and so on. Then we might talk about what GDP means for us. But otherwise, as every citizen's like, meh.
Yeah, no, it really doesn't, like, the country having so much GDP isn't really like a positive thing for the average person as much, unless you're like Ronald Reagan and you like to talk about trickle-down economics, but that's just like, those have proven not to be really that effective, have they? But like, that's the thing is, if you're a company though, and you see that, you're going to want to get a piece of that because regardless of like how it's being distributed, you could have business with the richest people, right? Like, so all of the people controlling the wealth would be like, all right, I own McDonald's, so I'll buy plastic forks from Amazon, right? To like give in my restaurants. So like still the people who control the wealth would probably use the service of one of these companies. Like it doesn't matter how it's distributed. It's just the wealth is there and they want a piece of that wealth, that company, right? Like, because if they offer something to the person controlling that wealth, that person will probably want to buy into that.
Yeah, sure. So
yeah, that's all the point I was making.
Oh, also. So what I was trying to say is not necessarily that suddenly Amazon-like company turns into this awesome company, CEO starts being a psychopath and something like that. But if they decide to pay some extra bucks an hour and give some longer breaks and alleviate the biggest complaints, your idea of union and worker co-ops might be harder to sell. Okay, so you really would need to come up with a very, very, very big, great differentiator, great selling point, as otherwise you just present, in my opinion, a small incremental difference in quality and not something substantial. Okay, so what is something that if the owner, the existing CEO throws you some benefits, what is something that you can bring even to look even bigger, and not necessarily in like one more wage, because this is one more dollar per hour, because that's a game you cannot play and compete against a corporation, an established corporation like Amazon or something.
Yeah, no, that's the hard part, right? It's all about picking and choosing your battles, knowing which ones you're going to win. But that's like kind of the movement for, towards socialism in general, right? Like the only way to work with, like, actually get a stable socialist state is to work within the framework of like what we have right now, because we don't want to completely collapse structures and we don't want to completely collapse or destabilize the economy. So we're going to work within it to get, eventually more worker rights. And just as a result, like, it's going to trend in that direction. That's like, I'm not even implying that, it might get there, it might not get there, but I'm saying the more and more we get like better, treatment for the average worker, the more and more we're going to, either make capitalism work for us or make socialism happen.
Exactly. But I hope you see what I'm trying to get at, because you come and say, hey, look, we have this data from this many years and this many companies, and says the workers are happy. And we have the classic example with Amazon, people not happy and pinging buttons. Okay, if you solve that and you still want to push towards socialism or other left style ideologies, you really need selling points. And you not only need selling points to say, hey, things will be greater, you need something specific, concrete things that you need to, state in one sentence or in one paragraph. No biggie, we don't hurry. Okay, but you really need to state those. Okay, so yeah, if the owner of Amazon gave the people $1, what is something that I can not only promise but also deliver to the worker, and that will make their quality of life, of everything, way better.
Oh yeah, see, there's a lot of like workplace like struggles like that. So like they get, they might get the higher wage, but that might not be what, like that might not be all they want. They might like want shorter work week or something like that, right?
Okay. So let's say Amazon will decide to give you a shorter work week, because why not?
Right.
Again,
yeah, just hypothetical.
Yes, absolutely. You are now facing again an even harsher. They on certain points, they can stay at least one step ahead of you and your ideology, your ideas, what you are promoting. Okay, so that's my thingy. You still kind of need something very profound and concrete that goes from bottom to the top and says, hey, yeah, whatever, you can throw money at us, you can throw this and that, we still need which is a way better quality and affects and impact the people in such positive way that you cannot deliver unless you become, socialist, or you really embrace and become a worker co-op or something.
Yeah, no, like there's a lot of concrete stats that I think will make people not necessarily hand over the capital, but start worker cooperatives in the future with the right incentivization from the government. Like maybe governments will offer like subsidies or some kind of support to people who start up worker cooperatives, because, they use some of the data that I have that says, like, for example, like there's a study, if you want, I can link it to you. But
of course,
yeah, it says greater employee participation in workplace decisions is linked to better firm performance and enhanced employee motivation, commitment, and job satisfaction in several like empirical studies. Traditional worker cooperatives are 100% employee owned, and like they characterize a high degree of employee participation. In general, employee ownership, can enhance the job satisfaction and employee motivation, which, and it benefits the firm and themselves, right? Like this is just a positive thing overall for people, right? So maybe the government wants to trend in that direction because we have results of these studies, and I'll send you the link in the private chat of the stream. Mm-hmm. But sure. Maybe this, this makes the government go, okay, this is how we can positively increase the like quality of lives for our people. Well, let's, give some kind of like tax refund to people who start off a worker cooperative, right? Like that would be a way to effectively institute them.
Two problems with that. One, the fact that the workers could have a word in the decision-making process. I believe that is something that could be implemented in, let's say, the proverbial Amazon corporation. Okay, and secondly, government intervention, and not only intervention. You said the government would give subsidies to Amazon. I don't think that is a thing that should be promoted, because already Amazon benefits from all sorts of subsidies and things, power taken and given from the government in a very and that's why I'm saying, like, giving even more power and money to Amazon, like, yeah, let's not go there.
Yeah, no, we don't want to give more power to Amazon, but like, I'm just like, when I said subsidies, I meant to, like newly started worker cooperatives. So it might be like just a small business that wants to get off the ground and needs some kind of funding to, like keep itself afloat, but it's like, providing overall like really high employee satisfaction rates, right? Like, then that would probably be something that the government would, want to get in on. And they would probably be like, okay, if we can, make the like quality of lives for the people in our nation like marginally increased, like we'll put a little money in this direction, and this will probably come out to positively impact the economy because, they'll output into the economy with, whatever product they're producing or whatever service they provide. Right. So like, maybe I want to give more power to Jeff Bezos. Maybe I just kind of want to level the playing field with the small business because, it's really toxic when we let a big company like Amazon get a monopoly going. So in order to like prevent monopolies from happening, this would be a good thing too. We could, subsidize these small businesses to come up and sort of get their foot in the door, right? They don't want to be bought out immediately by these big companies, right?
Okay.
This still breeds competition in the market, like in the market structure.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Sorry, I said I don't want to like completely abolish the market structure. So I would want, like, this would still breed competition, right? So this would, again, still drive people to work harder, like all of the classic, capitalist talking points in terms of like the market structure. But I'm not taking away the market aspect of a lot of private businesses, especially with worker cooperatives, right?
I would like to strongly disagree with this point, but and throw another question. For example, I would say that if you are a worker co-op, and here we can, are you familiar with the startup technology, startups, all sorts of social media platforms, applications for, iOS, Android, and stuff like that, and companies trying to start businesses in this domain? Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, there's a lot of like tech-based co-ops. Like, I've seen those, right?
Okay. Yeah. But besides the obvious example of tech co-ops, which kind of work, on the classical, outside the working co-ops, on the classical, setting up your company in Delaware or something, or starting with your friends, the classical LLC, you encounter a huge amount of problems and hurdles, and it's not necessarily that other companies don't face them. The problem is that if you want to grow beyond a certain stage, you are forced to take decisions against your best interests, and second, you are literally, how to say, hunted by the bigger corporations like Facebook, who forcefully buy certain applications on the threat of either you sell to us or you will, or we will build another company, another app just like you, and put you out of the market.
Yeah, that's a lot of like the predatory nature of a lot of these companies, right? So like, it's important to have restrictions, though. Like, again, I know you may not be huge on the government regulation thing, but I think it's good if it's run by, essentially by the people, because, a lot of the Trotskyist, like, classic literature states we need a dictatorship of the proletariat. So when the government is run by the people, I think that's like the better system overall. Like, that's why I want to kind of abolish these like really unjust hierarchies. Again, like, I think parties, political parties, just the nature of how those things get started up, that's not really, working in people's best interests.
Well, up until that moment, you are, for example, behind the idea of giving money to these worker co-ops. And let's say that there are tech startups who want to start by the means of a working co-op. Okay, but you give them money, you finance them. Of course, they have an idea, maybe a great idea. They work, they feel well, and they are motivated. But there is this threshold in which huge company X will come and say, "Hey, folks, either you sell to us, and we will absorb you, merge with you, or whatever, take over in one way or another, or we will copy and put you out of business." Okay, I believe that is a level
That's
of
a very
development.
serious, yeah, that's a very
Yeah,
serious threat, right?
exactly, where the government is having difficulties to intervene right now because more free market trope. Okay,
Yeah,
and
no,
it will also be very difficult for the government to intervene and take the side of somebody, of the smaller guy, so to say, in the working co-op example. Okay,
oh
so
yeah, no, there's a
I
really
see.
big issue too that I just wanted to point out really quickly. A lot of the times, a lot of these politicians are already been like lobbied for by these, big corporations, right? They, fund their campaigns, things like that. They give them preferential treatment, maybe on their own platforms and stuff, right? Which, the politician will advocate in those big companies' best interest. But like, I'm not advocating for a free market. I'm advocated for a heavily regulated market because I think the most important way to make sure that there's like a genuine free market, people are able to buy things, the products that they most desire, is to restrict predator monopolies, from like infringing on those, other smaller companies, right? So maybe I'd restrict through some kind of patent law on this, like this company's new app that they're started. So I'd be like, well, here's a copyright that says you are like basically cutting way too close to the service that, your competitor is providing, right? So that's like the
Yeah.
kind of protection policies that I would implement to make it so that, these big corporations don't eat the little guy alive. Between funding from the government, like because, I see a co-op and the people like co-ops now because, they're in a positive light, maybe because that's like just, they're popular, right? I want to keep my job. I'm a politician, and I want to keep my job because people like these co-ops now. Okay, so I'm going to incentivize the co-op. All right, now that the co-op is incentivized, I have to make sure that the, joint stock model companies don't eat the co-op alive. So then I put in restrictions to make sure that the company doesn't eat them alive. So that way now we have like a freer, even though it's more regulated, it's still a freer market because, now there's more companies that have the opportunity to flourish, which, that's how like the money circulates around the economy, right? Because it exchanges more hands because it's not all being built up and all the wealth is being kept by just like these large capital owning individuals.
Mm-hmm. No, I hear what you say, and I'm thinking, okay, right now, for example, established corporations, not only the big corporations, but also medium-sized or smaller corporations, do bribe and heavily lobby, through lobby and other types of bribe, influence politics. Okay, and that's a huge has a huge impact and is a very big amount of influence. Okay, and right now you are arguing, you are saying, hey, let's build something, another instrument, and at the end of this instrument, it's a handle, and that handle should be in the hand of the people. But right now, I don't think you have enough structure, as in legislation, norms, normatives, and other forms of expressing this power of the people, which would sort of contradict and counterbalance what the lobbyists are pushing. Okay,
Oh, I completely
let
agree
me.
with you. It's a really
And
bad thing that we let these companies lobby us, right? Because those are the kind of things that keep them, they keep the wealth into the hands of such a small minority of people because they are allowed to basically control the state of our legislation. So that's what I liked about like a Bernie Sanders type. They were completely grassroots because all of these big corporations knew that he was bad. They knew that they weren't, going to fund him, right? But
Mhm.
this lets them kind of make an unbiased legislation towards the people. It might not be completely unbiased, but you know what I'm saying. It's not biased by the corporation because he's not in the pockets of these companies. So just like through things like that, we'll slowly but surely get more legislation that leans in favor of the people as opposed to in favor of the corporation, right? Like that's all I'm saying is like I know it's very, it's a long shot, it's a far cry. But what we can do is we can, sort of return like legislation to being back to only being beneficial to the people and not, special interest groups, right?
Yeah, sure. So I'm not opposed to what you say. I'm just pointing out that what you say, and this is the type of things that I hear a lot from the people on the left, are good slogans, but they lack the meaning, the practical ways through which to do that. Because if we look at lobbyists, they definitely have legislations which allows lobbyists to take money from one side and push certain pieces of legislations on the other end. Okay, but we don't have the same instruments for the power of the people. Are you familiar with Luis Rossmann, the repair dude from New York?
No, I'm not, unfortunately.
Okay, well, for there is this dude, sort of Italian American, very nice, cool dude, who has a repair shop for smartphones. And for a couple of years, plenty of years, he has an awesome channel. He filmed himself and put on YouTube how he repaired laptops. Usually, they are, I think, mostly Apple laptops, Macs, and iOS and stuff like that, and smartphones. And he was complaining about how Apple is trying to shut down his right to repair and because he's an independent repair shop, he also needs components, and sometimes he buys those components from China, from or other outside of the United States, and has various issues. And at a certain point, I think in the last couple of years, 1 or 2 or something like that, he got involved with lobbying various, I think, various commissions to pass the Right of Repair Act. Okay, and at each step there are lobbyists from this Apple company and other people, other producers who are saying, no, you shouldn't have the right to repair and so on and so forth. And he has a very good series of videos in which he discusses the power these lobbyists have and how their interests and how they are connected and paid. Okay, and he literally tells what he is trying to do in this state or in the other state, and how other people, and it's literally grassroots, because there are only a couple of people literally going to these debates and trying to tell their points in 3 or 5 minutes and limited amount of time. So that's why I'm saying, because it is a very huge difference in what a lobbyist from an established firm with connections and money and time on their hands can accomplish, and what you are proposing. I'm not saying that what you are proposing is a bad thing. I'm saying that you really need to build this infrastructure and you really need to think big in order to achieve what you want.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. That's a huge criticism I get all the time of like my type of movement, right? Is that we don't have a lot of infrastructural power and we don't have a lot of people, on the inside or working, right? Like, because my, my type of government seems like very unpopular with, like the big corporate interests, right? Because that takes a lot of capital away from them. And I agree with you. I think we need to set up a lot more, like, I think we need to work on, spreading awareness of like what our policies are advocating for, because I still feel like there's a strong stigmatization of the word socialism, And like a lot of people think it's a scary thing and a thing that they wouldn't want to implement into their own government because, they've heard, oh, the USSR is a bad place, right? Now, I don't think that's because of the socialist aspect. I think that's more because of the revolutionary aspect, right? Like there's a lot of failed revolutions because, that leads to a lot of instability. So that's like a big thing I agree with is this is going to be a very slow and a very long struggle. This is going to be something that the people are going to have to like try to spread awareness on and advocate for like as grassroots as possible. And it'll be nice to see a lot of like more candidates getting into power because there's people like, people who are socialist leaning and social, like, going that way that are getting into power, even at just like a state level. Which is nice to see. And this is kind of how movements are built, right? They just get built like that. It takes a lot of time to put together something that's going to need to be so powerful, which I completely agree with you on. Like, it's not going to happen overnight, right? You know what they say, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah. Well, what I would suggest, if you would allow me, is to look at this person's channel, Luis Rosman, okay, and maybe try and get involved with a topic like this, which might be immediate from one year to another, like the right of to repair. Okay, not necessarily because it's directly a socialist project, but simply because it allows you to gather people around you, to gather resources and to distribute, to make a structure and to have practical experience with something that interacts sort of daily, weekly with the government and the entities in power and kind of gives you a completely new and different perspective from just being on YouTube and saying, yes, we shall implement socialism or we shall promote worker co-ops and stuff like that. It really gives you something practical and measurable. And if you win, you have something to be proud of. And if you fail, at least you tried and you still have a huge amount of experience that can be, spread among other people who might be interested in what you are promoting.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, but I gotta say, this is kind of the part where I have to wrap up this conversation. It's a little bit of something going on around me right now.
Yeah.
But I think
Sure.
this was a great conversation, and I think it was important that we discuss, how movements get started, how they get built up, and things like that, right? We could get more into worker cooperatives fundamentally at some other time, but I think it was a good conversation about how they get established and how policy, gets put into place to allow them to flourish, right?
Yeah, totally agree with you. Thank you for coming. We do need to also touch upon this kind of topics because people talk about, let's say, worker co-ops like somewhere, sometimes in the future on a different planet and so alternate universe or something like that. Like, no, you need to start connecting whatever you want to achieve with today's infrastructure and go from there, not after the magical revolution had happened and take place.
Right. Yeah. No, it
And
shouldn't be a foreign concept to anyone, right? It should be a very realistic goal, and we should look at it like we want to get this done.
So, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to say that it was great being here. I'm glad that you had me on the show. It let me explain my positions a little better, and things like that. No straw man, very productive conversation too, as well. For anyone watching, you can find me on Spotify at Dylan Blay. On Instagram at DylanBlay _. You can catch me around usually. Anyone who wants to talk about anything, feel free to send me a message on any platform like that. It was nice being on the show. It was nice discussing this. Maybe we'll take this up some other time, talk about this more in depth later. Yeah.
Totally, Dylan. Let's pick it up, in the next weeks or something, and let's get more into the details of it because it's a great topic. Thank you for
absolutely
coming.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you everyone, and bye. See you next time.